Good evening, everybody. I'm watching the numbers tick up as we let everybody into the room. Give us a moment, and we're going to begin. I know we have a good starting group, and I know people will trickle in over the next few minutes. But I want to welcome you to tonight's presentation on the SAT and the ACT. I am Jed Applerouth, here with my friend and colleague, Matt Kiesner.
Hey, Jed.
Good evening, Matt.
Everyone.
Yes, we're doing what we've done for many years together, talking about what's going on with these tests. They are changing yet again, or the ST has changed, and there's a new test coming for the ACT in a matter of weeks. So I know you are excited, and what it means for your kids, what it means in terms of taking the paper test or the digital test, the SAT or the ACT. It's definitely, things are in flux. So I think we're about to hit our plateau here, and then we can begin, and people will trickle in over the next 5-10 minutes. So let us jump in. We're going to have, there is a poll. Welcome to the poll. 2 questions. Are you a parent, student, educator? And then if you are a parent or student, what grade are you in? And then that goes away, and that's easy enough. Okay, so we'll close that out. And let us jump in. So Matt and I are going to do a little tag team where I go, Matt goes, I go, Matt goes. At the end, we'll have an open Q&A, and we'll field your questions together. A little context in terms of who we are. My background, started doing this in 2001, and I've watched the tests just evolve over now 23, almost 24 years. So things keep shifting, and just giving the context, Matt has been the chief content creator, test writer, test analyzer, for Applerouth for years, working very closely with our head of curriculum, Richard Vigneault. But Matt has a level of knowledge about this, I think, unparalleled. And so we like to have if you have really deep questions about anything in this field of testing, Matt knows even better than I. So it's nice to have that expertise, that level of depth together with my background and my long history in this space. All right, so let us jump in. And again, we're going to go back and forth. I think we open up with a few slides, just giving you context of where the world is now. And the SAT is currently ascendant yet again. There was a moment in time, I remember pretty clearly, before they brought on a new CEO over at the College Board, where the ACT was crushing it. They were the #1 test. They had statewide contracts in 25 some states. They were just killing it. But then they didn't innovate. People liked the digital SAT, the new changes. And then after the pandemic, you can see College Board is rebounding. They're right at 2 million students again, but the ACT is pretty flat, a little lackluster. They just, were acquired by a for-profit company and Nexus Capital out in LA. They have new leadership. The old CEO got kicked. We have a new CEO, Janet Godwin, who got us through the pandemic, and she's trying to guide us through the next chapter. But they're trying to innovate. So we see why there's real innovation happening with the ACT, because there has to be, because they're flagging, and the College Board is right now dominant again. All right, so the growth of the SAT, students like the short format. It's a nice short test. Kids like it. Kids have more time per question. There's a built-in calculator that's very useful. Admins love it. There's no paper to collate and put together and matching up Scantron. There's no more Scantrons, which is amazing. Those were really annoying. That was technology from the 40s from IBM. And it's time to get rid of that old stuff and move on to the next generation. There are still problems finding testing access. If you're in California, sucks to be you in the testing world, because there are so many test centers before the pandemic are not open now. A lot of high schools are keeping it closed to their own students, doing it school-day testing. And just when their flagship university system, when UC and Cal State went test blind, a lot of schools just said, we're not going to even offer these tests. But then we've had this huge influx of now tests required for the top schools in the country. And a lot of kids are struggling. We have kids flying to Idaho from California. We have kids going up to Washington State trying to find a test if they're in California, which is really obnoxious. So there are still some issues with even after the pandemic. But in general, the SAT is doing great. Now, let's talk about the testing structure and time. Currently, in the current format, and this is only going to be for a little while longer. This is about to be reharmonized. The SAT got a lot shorter, and now it's 2 hours and 14 minutes of content, 10-minute break in the middle. It's a really short administration. Going there at 8:30, the kids are out by 11. It's amazing. I remember, not so long ago, so does Matt, when you'd go in there at 8 o'clock and leave at 1:30. when you had this full test with 10 sections and then almost an hour essay. Those days are long gone. Now it's a nice short test and it's very student friendly, less attentionally demanding, which is wonderful for kids who have any kind of attentional issues, ADHD and so forth. So SAT, short, you have a baseline reading and writing section, and then the adaptive. It's an adaptive computer-based test, 10-minute break, baseline math, adaptive math, and you are done. For the ACT in its current form, it's been in this form essentially more or less since 1959, where you have reading in English, your verbal, and not in this order. And then you have your math section, and then you have your science section. So it's kind of, you have your verbal, and then you have your math too. Then you have, some students have this experimental section at the end. And that's the current structure. The new structure coming digitally in April and coming paper in September is this. They said, all right, SAT, you're going short. We're going to go even shorter. I'll see you at 2:14 and I'll raise you. I'm going to see you at 2 hours and 5 minutes for the core sections. You'll notice that science is now an optional section. And that's a real big question for us of how many colleges are going to require science or recommend science. We have no idea right now. And we're advocating students who take the science as a precaution, just in case one of the schools on your list says we require science. We don't want anyone to be stuck, which happened previously when the essay was optional and some schools said, no, we require the essay, and some kids were scrambling. So until we know more, the default position is take the science, but it might not count. We'll talk about that more at length. But again, they're short sections, reading, English, math, and then those who opt in for science take science, otherwise 2 hours and 5 minutes, and kids leave. That's amazing. That's fast. All right, so the structure, we have two structures. We have the digital adaptive computer-based SAT, where again, everyone takes a very similar baseline test, which has a mixture of easy, medium, hard questions. If I get over 2/3 right, boom, I go to the hard section. If I get below 2/3 right, boom, I go to the easier section. Same thing for verbal, then 10-minute break, then same thing for math, okay? So it goes baseline, adaptive, break, baseline, math, adaptive, and you're finished. All right, so the digital core ACT is not an adaptive test. It is a static test. Nothing is changing. Everyone takes the same test no matter how you perform. If I get everyone right, I'm getting the same questions as the person that gets everyone wrong. It goes in lockstep, reading, English, math, and then if I opt in, science. So it's just a shorter, it's called a linear test, not an adaptive test. It's an important thing, both for the computer one coming in April, and then for the paper-based one coming in September. So make sure you note that. So SAT, adaptive, ACT, linear, static. All right. So structurally, one of the most positive changes that we saw when they redesigned the SAT was that it has become a much less time-intensive, less speedy test. Processing speed has always been a thing for the SAT and ACT. The College Board has been scaling back the focus on speed, and they really scaled it back with the most recent iteration of this test, but it went digital, adaptive. So currently, students have 71 seconds per question on verbal compared to 41 seconds on ACT. And then also 95 seconds for math compared to a minute flat on the ACT. That's a big difference. 70% difference on the SAT verbal and 59% difference on the math. So kids have more time. And in some cases, they may need some of that time because the questions are harder. The level of reading is still more advanced on the SAT. You have a lower level reading on the ACT. But by and large, if you're on the ACT, you are moving against that clock. It is speed. I started teaching the ACT back in 2003 and 4, and I've always had a timer. And it's always speed and timing. Don't get stuck on a problem. On go, 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 go. That's less of the focus on the SAT. However, so the new core ACT, they're being a little more generous. Before, they had 41 seconds a question for verbal. Now it's 52. That's helpful. And similarly, they gave kids another 7 seconds per question on the math. That's helpful. So they're moving away from processing speed, but you can see it still is more of a speed-based test than is the SAT. Structurally, the number of items is a lot lower. There's still a benefit of having a digital adaptive test. Whenever you go adaptive, you can get rid of items that are not relevant for the student. If a student is an advanced student crushing the hard questions, digital adaptive, I'm not going to give them the easy questions on the adaptive part because they're not going to be helpful. We've already proven a student is doing great. In all likelihood, they're going to crush those easy items unless there's a careless error. So they are able to reduce the number of items and focus on items that are more in line with the student's ability level. And that's why on the verbal section of the SAT in its current form, you have a grand total of 54 items for verbal to give them the score, versus on the ACT, they're the same assessment, they're giving 115 items. That is profound, because that's one of the benefits of being an adaptive test. On the whole test, you have a grand total of 98 items on the current SAT and 215, so more than double, which shows you the benefits of an adaptive test. It's just fewer items, getting rid of the material that's not going to be really predictive. All right, and now there's less of a difference when it comes to the ACT with the new core. So again, we had 115 verbal, English and e-reading, but on the new test, we're dropping down to 86. That's helpful. And if we don't count science, the total number of items drops down to 131 versus 215. So we're seeing some nice changes in the direction of the students here. Also, I mentioned this kind of reiterating the time and the structure. So you have 54 verbal questions, only 44 math questions, and then 98 total. Embedded in those, every section has 2 questions that are experimental, 2 on the baseline, 2 on the adaptive for verbal, 2 baseline math to adapt. So every test, there are 8 questions which don't count. Those are pre-test questions. They're trying to figure out how hard is the question and make sure there's no bias in terms of by gender, by ethnicity, by geography, demography. All right. And now we know that the core ACT is a mere months away. We're about to hit February, March, and then April, we have the core ACT is coming to test centers all over the country. Though not distributed evenly, and there's a slide about that. In certain markets, you're going to be hard pressed to find one. Other markets, it's down the street. And here is the structural change. Just want to show you this, and then I think I'll hand it over to Matt for a good part of it. The current structure is this. You can see the number of questions. English, 75, going down to 50. Bam. That's a profound drop. Math, we're culling 15 questions. Boom, those are gone. Reading, dropping 4. Science, same number of questions, but they're giving you another 10 minutes. So we see that reduction from 215 questions currently down to 171 if I include science. That's still nice. That's a nice drop. 44 questions less. Timing, again, you can see the more granular speed differential. We're giving kids 17% more time on English, 11% more time on math, 27% more time per question on reading, and then almost 30% on science. So net, we're up 20% more time. So kids have more time. They're going to walk out of there saying, wow, that wasn't as fast. That wasn't as speedy, which we love. All right. And now the optional focus, STEM kids, we still need to know how it's going to play out in the sphere of college admissions. We may see colleges say, we've used science since 1959. Guess what? We still want the science. Even though the ACT, they give us the research showing that, you know what? The delta, it's under a point for almost all kids in terms of the change in your composite score. So you're really there's still a lot of reliability. And it's also equally valid without that science. Because ultimately, science is mostly about reading and then a little bit of math skills. And so it correlates really highly with your reading skills. If you want a science score for real, if you look at someone's AP Bio or AP Chemistry, that's a proper do you know science. This is it's more of a reading test, honestly, in many domains. But they're going to score it at a 36. It's going to be a separate standalone score, not part of the composite score. So you say I got a 32 on the ACT plus I got a 34 science. It's not ever going to be part of that composite ever again. It's going to be an add-on score, like your essay used to be. I got an 1190 on the ST plus I got an 11 on the essay. So it's going to be something they can measure and use, but not as part of that composite score, and it'll be a separate standalone. All right. And the experimental sections, we have some confirmation that even within this greatly reduced test item, English has 50 items, 75, 10 of the items are experimental. That leaves only 40 down from 75, which means items count more. Careless mistakes count higher. Math, we are at 60. Now there are 4 of them experimental, so only 41 are functional items. Reading, we're at 40. Now we're going down to only 27 functional items. And I'm doing math on the fly.
Whenever you need it, Jed, I'm here.
You got me, Matt. You got good at the math. And then science. So that's a pretty big number. So on the SAT, there are only 8 experimental items. Here we see a total of 29, which is pretty meaningful.
Yeah. And
So
the
again, careless error does count more.
just to comment on that, Jed, the for the reading, the new structure is it's 9 questions per passage. So there's 4 passages, and so this does seem to see that one of the passages is essentially experimental.
Experimental. There's a good
Uh,
chance that we pre-testing a whole passage.
right,
That
which
makes sense.
is pretty wild. That's still a little bit of inference, and there's 9 questions maybe pushed about, but it does seem to be lending itself towards that idea that
In the
there's
same fashion, English, the passage is either 10 or 5, right?
yeah. So it's probably one of the long passages is
Either
experimental.
one long or two short will be experimental. That makes complete sense. Okay. I know your slides are coming up soon. 1 second.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think
Matt.
we rolled by it.
You know what, Matt? Let me hand this over to you.
Yeah, I'm happy. Thanks, Jed.
Okay.
Okay, so we do know some things of the proposed content changes. So the English is changing probably the most of any of the sections. Um, the current test is 5 fairly long passages, 15 questions each. Instead, now it's going to be uh, 4 passages of 10 questions, and then 2 short passages, only 5 questions, so fewer questions, but more passages. One of them will be an argumentative essay, and we have seen an example of this. It's nothing to really be worried about. It doesn't feel different than any of the other ones. That was a worry on our curriculum team, was if we have to have like separate instruction for it. But after seeing an example, it's not the case. And then there will be stems for every question. And what that means is that they're going to say, which choice makes this grammatically correct, or which choice is the least redundant, or which word is the clearest in meaning at this point. Where previously it had just been for most of the questions, 4 choices, and then you just have to assume that whatever sounds best. And so for math is not changing too much, except um, all the sections are 4 answer choices except for math, which has been 5 answer choices, and so they're moving that down to 4 choices. So there's not there's a slightly fewer items, but there's also now like your likelihood of guessing is increased, right, going from 20% to 25%. So that is an advantage. Um, so they have said that there's going to be fewer questions in advanced topics, though there are fewer questions in general. So I think that might be more of a marketing thing about don't worry, we didn't make the math extra hard. Um, and there's gonna be fewer word problems. One thing that the ACC is kind of known for is these kind of garbage word problems with telling a whole story about going to the carnival and how much money you're spending and what percentage was spent on skee ball, and it's just junk math. And so it looks like they're getting rid of that kind of stuff and actually focusing on like a straightforward assessment of math skills. And then if your question in integrating essential skills category, this is something that's not real. This is kind of inside baseball, but there are certain questions that we're trying to test multiple things at once, and they are reducing that. Though I don't think that's really going to affect most students' experience. And then we got on the reading one, so they were very like we've seen from the example they've given so far. They took one passage and they cut a little bit out of it, but it's not significantly shorter. In a way that like, oh well, this feels like a short passage like they have on the SAT. They are adding more. Well, I don't think they're adding more. They're not getting rid of these integration of knowledge and ideas questions, which is those are the comparison questions when you have one of the passages will have two authors, and so they seems that they've eliminated it's what they call the craft and structure question, or not not eliminated, they've reduced the craft and structure the number of craft and structure questions. And then they're saying that they want to have diverse perspectives, though interestingly that was missing from the most recent slide deck. And the science one, there's going to be one topic of engineering and design. Though honestly, on the curriculum team, we were kind of arguing about which of the two it was on the test, and there will require more background knowledge. So the as Joe was saying, that it is a reading test, but there's always been like you have no certain terms, and these are they're fairly basic, but they are involving ideas of physics or chemistry, and there's likely to be more of that because it seems that the science section they're trying to sell it as something is a specialty versus like general knowledge. So we'll see how that plays out. And so there's gonna be a lot of options for this. So the core ACT will be the primary product, and it'll be the English, reading, and math, and that the students will take. If your student wants to take the science section, then there'll be the add-on there. We haven't mentioned it. There still is an essay on ACT. It's of real no value to students. No school requires it, and few schools even consider it. But I think the ACT has found that like if they leave it on there, that it generates revenue. It's an add-on that that it clearly it still makes enough money for them to have it. And you can also do both if you're, if you like long testing experiences. The ACT is happy to make sure you don't get home before 2 p.m. and you've done the science and the writing. So you could do all those things um, in that experience there. And so we're rolling this out. You can register for the April this the new core test now. I'm registered for April. I'm gonna go in there, pretend to be 16. I think I can still pull it off.
Pull it off, man. Come
Yeah,
on, you got this.
yeah. Well,
Very
um,
mature for your age.
right. So um, but it's only if you take the digital test. So if you have a student like a junior who is signed up for the paper test, it will be the the classic experience of the science is mandatory and all the materials and practice tests and everything will align with that. And so we're in the spring we're going to be in kind of sort of a transfer experience. And I should also say that this is only for U.S. based students. So I know that there's often questions about international. International's changing over September. They're not doing a pre-release. Even though internationally you must take the ACT digitally. It's been that way for several years now. So in 2025, in September, it will become the only option is to take this new core test. And updating composite scores. So that your composite score will be the 3, and then the science is like just hanging off. They do offer if they'll take your math and your science score and give you a STEM score but it's still a separate category. And so that does seem to like it will influence current juniors who are going to be seniors in September and their college applications, is that the ACT is going to be pushing forward those three sections. How colleges will look at it, I think that's the biggest unknown. What they'll do. I mean, if it's like the SAT, it seems like they're going to play along, rather than try to, if they accept tests, the policy will probably stay the same. And then for district testing, so the ACT has a lot of state deals and district deals, and do in-school that's not changing until the spring. So there's no wild cards in any of that district stuff. All right. So for our juniors here, you have an options here. You can take the classic one, or you can do the speedy one. As well, see that availability of the core test on computers may not be in your region. And so it's definitely maybe harder to get. And there's a general feeling that there might be some bugs and some quirks. They're not doing it the same way that the SAT does, which is where you don't have you download your test ahead of time, so it doesn't need Wi-Fi. So you have to be connected to the internet the entire testing experience. And so for most students, I'm not suggesting that they rush into April. I think if you have for a junior, if you have the time and you have like you can take the June test, or it might be good to sit this one out just to see what happens. I'm gonna jump in and see what's going on, but it may not. Like they may have some kinks to work out on there. Um, but everything goes to September, and if you're a lover of paper, then you can take the new test on paper because it's the only option. Um, so the yeah right, and then we'll see what this. And so here we have the Atlanta stuff. I'm gonna be hanging out at one of these locations. Though a lot of them are like it's either if Atlanta's geography is either really way north or way south of the city, or there's very very few actually in Atlanta on there.
But this still like the mileage is not that big of a deal. Going 12 miles or even going 20 miles, half an
Yeah,
hour in your car. There's still quite a few options in Atlanta. But like, look at this. There was a recent article. If you get our newsletter, this was an article we wrote
yeah,
in January. I went and I was querying how many places are available in these different markets where we see students. And in Boston, there's nothing. The big zero. If you're in Boston, nothing in April, nothing in June, nothing in July, zero. So you can't take it within like 100 miles.
yeah.
Chicago, pretty good for April and June. And July, some centers haven't opened up yet for this. I expect those numbers will drop once they lock in more people. In Connecticut, we have plenty of folks in New York, 12 miles away. New York City, 14 miles away. But DC, you have to go 71 miles to find a center. That's cumbersome. And up again in New York, Westchester County, 9 miles. In LA, 70 miles. Houston, Texas, 10 miles. In Iowa City, amazingly, the home of the ACT, you have to go 50 miles to find a seat for April. And so that really is a total drag. So to me, it's like, I don't know if I'd go more than 15, 20 miles, but I wouldn't go 70 miles. And then, but some of our kids in LA, trying to find seats for the SAT and other things, they're traveling, hundreds of miles because they want to apply to Stanford or MIT or Harvard where the tests are required. So you can see there's quite a discrepancy between marketplaces. And if you're in Seattle, there's nothing in April, nothing in June. If you're in LA, there's nothing in June. If you're in Boston, there's nothing. So again, these are the problem markets for testing. The far west, strange about Boston. I don't know what's up with that, but
Yeah, I mean, you would think in a town that has a few colleges.
but it could be that, they opened up 4 or 5 centers and boom, they filled up within a matter of like a day. That
Yeah,
there
that
was
might be.
because there were a lot of kids who were anxious to go to those schools, and some of them require testing. So maybe they had an availability. Whereas like Seattle and LA, the problem in LA is no one's opening up. So there's just very, very little. There's big demand in LA and no supply. Boston, they may have just already cleared now. But who knows? That's details I don't have. Just kind of going through this registration. Matt went through this. I went through this. Do you need accommodations? No. Computer or paper? I could put computer. With science, sure, give me science. Writing, no writing. Um, but and then it tells you, no, based on the zip code you provided, the nearest computer test center is 12 miles away from you. So it's still giving you the option of computer or paper. But then there are some real questions. We'll talk about this in terms of bring your own device coming up. Then there's the fee, mid 60s, $4 for science. That's a pretty decent price for science. I pay $4 for science. And a hot
What's the
dog at
cost per
Costco
question?
is 150 for the hot dog at Costco. Unlimited toppings. And then there you go.
What's the price per question, Jed, on the
Price per okay. So we're talking 40 questions, $4. A mere dime. A dime a question.
yes, that a
That, my
question?
friend, is a bargain for you. So yes. All right, Matt, talk about the new practice materials.
Yeah, we did this presentation maybe a month and a half, some early December, I think. And so the biggest change has been that the ACD does have an official practice test that you can view online. Um, it's kind of hidden in the search sample question thing, um, and it is an adaptation of of the 24 MC1. So this is a test form that they've released prior, and so it gives a sense that they're taking former tests and adapting them to this new format. Um, the So you can go on there, you can take it timed or untimed. and see the the question types on there. Um, the um, the important thing is that there's no scoring on this. The when you finish a section, it will tell you what you got right and wrong. But there's nothing that is for you to be able to figure out what your score is. And if you remember, there's a lot of those experimental items, especially on the reading. So I don't know if they know which passage doesn't count on that test. And there was uh, a webinar that this morning from the ACT, and they acknowledge that they're not really sure how the scale is going to work yet. You really have to look at it if you want to try it and have your student try it. Is it like what's your percentage correct at this point? And know that it's not valid yet to be okay. Well, I mean, obviously you get all the questions right. You can generally assume it's going to be a 36, but trying to build a scale on that, I think, is the fool's errand at the moment.
Yeah, and that affects our ability to create practice tests with scoring because right now everyone's blind. Until we get scores back with scoring information, we're gonna improv it. We're gonna be able to imitate and create more practice for y'all, and that's coming, Matt, in the next month.
Yeah. So part of my job is to build this kind of stuff, and so the seeing that we had a practice test and seeing that it was that they um took one of the previous tests and applied changes to it. So we did the same thing. One of our proprietary tests has been adapted to the new format. It is the questions are finished and it is in our testing platform. It is currently in beta testing proofreading, and we don't know what to do scoring other than to give you a percentage correct for hopefully a reasonable reason. I think it would just be fraudulent for us to make any sort of assumptions on there. But to know that we're well on the way to getting this for the spring. On my work is exclusively working on stuff, and we're also updating our books and making for we will be ready by the summer for all of our materials
Yeah.
and for that push and
And Matt and the team, they already built 4 digital adaptive SATs, which are available for clients. And we actually give one for free for all
Mhm.
students. If you want to take one and try, we have that on our website, applerouth.com. All right. So Janet Godwin made a comment. She replaced Martin Rorta, guy who was talking about digital testing for years. And she made a comment at an interview in Inside Higher Education. You know what? As soon as demand for paper dries, we are going straight up full digital, like the SAT. But they're going to, for a time, have paper and digital. But eventually, for security's sake and other things, you want to go digital. Paper is a liability in so many ways because you still have the problem of, a paper form can leak. And you have one bad actor cuts that cellophane with a little razor, pulls it out, scans it, puts it back in, posts it, uploads somewhere, and shares it, and then you compromised it for the whole country. That's happened before. That happened in 2019 where they canceled the whole statewide. It was a school day test, and they killed it for the whole country because someone leaked it. So paper stinks, and eventually paper goes away. All right, there are some questions. Concordances. Have they made comments, Matt, that you're aware in terms of concording the old and the new?
Um, no, I think they've all of the ACT uh, news that they've done is it talks exclusively about the ACT and the ACT line of products. They've not mentioned anything about College Board in the same way that Pepsi doesn't often always talk about Coke in their advertising either. Um, I don't I mean I think it's a good issue because when the SAT changed basically the SAT was just steadfast said like the concordance is the concordance. We changed the test, but it doesn't matter that an 800 is an 800 and a 500 is a 500 and etc. And no one really called their bluff on it.
Yeah,
Um, so here we are. The ACT might do the same thing.
yeah,
Um, and there back in 2015 there was like some Cold War esque discussion about you know what a 29 on the ACT is versus a 1300 on the SAT, and they came up with an agreement. But there's no word on that at the moment.
And they would need a pretty big test. Like the most recent example, they had 750,000 students. It was done by the NCAA before the pandemic, because before you had a requirement for testing if you're going to be an athlete. I need a minimum threshold on testing to match a certain GPA. If I have under like a 2.0, I need to have like a 1050 or whatever it was to make sure the kids could actually read who are coming to play ball before they go in the transfer portal and make all their millions. If they're playing Div 1 ball, they'd still have, basic literacy requirements with, these tests. But now the NCAA dropped that requirement. Testing isn't mandated at all. It's optional so now it's just your grades, which there are problems there with grade inflation, especially for athletes who you want them playing on Saturday. But so it remains to be seen if they were going to ever do a new concordance, how that would happen, who would oversee it, because they've been done for decades with the NCAA being the overseeing body, but now they're not in the game anymore. So we'll see what happens with that. Matt, what do you think? You think colleges are going to broadly accept the changes?
I think this goes back to we were saying the SD, like what the College Board did with their changes was they have three consumers, right? They have students, they have like school counselors, like high school counselors and schools, and then they have colleges. And making that a digitally adaptive test, they seem to try to make it as easy on the first two of their customers. Make students want to take it, make it easier for schools to administer it, and they had to do in school day testing. And so far, it seems that like the colleges, if they use them, they did, and they, no, it did, no one seemed to make like a proclamation, like, oh, this is a much better test, so we're going to require it when we didn't, or vice versa. We don't have faith in this, and so we're not going to consider it. And I think the ACT is in that same process right now of that, get butts and seats, and then hope that colleges will toe the line, and accept those changes. Yeah,
Do you think students are going to like the changes, having a shorter test, more time?
sure. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, I don't think we have to. Would you like to do less of the same
Want to do
thing?
less? Want to go home earlier on Saturday? Check.
Yeah, and so I think it will be, students will like it. I think the instructions on the English are a lot clearer, for especially for students who are English language learners. I think it'll be a lot easier. It's taking out a lot of the guessing games on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, now does it make it better than the SAT? I think that now we're getting back into personal
That's the
choice.
question.
Yeah.
The Coke versus Pepsi, the duopoly. Who
Mhm.
will win? I do think there'll be some share reapportion towards the ACT. I think they're going to win some seats back with that shorter test. Because again, like the language level still is a good bit harder on the SAT. Some kids don't like that language level. They don't like having Shakespeare questions or other things, which you're not going to see on the ACT. All right, BYOD, bring your own device, but not a tablet and not a Mac. You have to have a Chrome. You can do a Windows clone, but you can't do a Mac or a tablet or a school-based device. So I'm not sure why they don't do a deal with Mac, and that would make a lot of sense because tons of kids have Macs. But you can't bring them. But Chromebooks are pretty cheap, and there may be a school-based device. And they're going to use Pearson's test nav interface, which they've been using since 2019 with the international test. And they download this thing called AC Gateway. And as Matt mentioned, you've got to have Wi-Fi all the way through. If Wi-Fi drops, you can't go forward. So that could be a problem. There's latency or lag issues if they stress the network. Not as good of a design. And other test centers do have this. Like when you take the GRE or the GMAT, they also require constant Wi-Fi, and this is also the way they've been doing it internationally since 2019 for 5 years. So we'll see, but I think that could be problematic in certain schools if their Wi-Fi is not as robust. Could be an issue.
Yeah.
There's a
A lot
recall.
of,
Yeah, Matt.
I mean, a lot of public schools are not known for good Wi-Fi. I'll say that.
Yeah. Some of the publics, they may not have robust Wi-Fi, especially when you stress it. When you
Right.
put 500 kids on the network, that might be a lot for, they have all the requirements and the bandwidth, but that still may be a stretch. And if they have the know-how to make sure they are up to specs. We have some ambiguity on the website. If you go look up today, I looked it up today, can you bring your own device? You go on the page called the BYOD page. They say yes. Students testing online will have the option to bring their own computer or a school-managed computer. Then on the ACT Online Questions page, looks like a clear no. If you select computer, you'll be able to find test centers that are offering. These centers will provide the devices. You will not be able to bring your own device. So we have conflicting information on the same website, which is shame on the ACT for not getting their website harmonized, because that is in it. So that I'm sure once you sign up for computer-based testing, they're going to contact you and give you emails about whether you can or can't bring your own device. Otherwise, if you have to bring your own device, you have to download in advance. So for sure, they're going to give you information, but right now it's just ambiguous.
Yeah, I can speak to that because I am registered for the April test, and they took my money and they told me I'm registered, but they did not give me any instruction yet in terms of what I should or should not bring.
And it's only January, so there still is
Yeah,
time
I
for them
mean,
to sort
I
it out.
recognize that, but I don't know if I'm bringing my own
Yeah, yeah. So
device or not.
that's kind of there. Okay. All right. We did a little research on there is research I should have posted from the ACT where they were showing that science doesn't really make that much of a difference to your composite. It's like less than a point on they give a whole presentation on the data and their analyses why they're making it optional because they figure they can get the same answer without that whole section. Why not do it? I had Ryan Paulson ran data. We had 4,500 students who've taken it in the past couple years. And looking at the average of our students across all the markets, reading, English, math, and science, and it turns out science correlates pretty highly. And if I run the composite score with science, 27.66, the composite on average without science, 27.88. It's a mean difference of 0.22. So by getting rid of a whole section, nothing really changes. And there are certain students who may be science wizards or, terrible at science where it might shift it by a full point. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of kids, I mean, if I would bucket those kids, they're in a small, under a few hundred kids probably. On average, science doesn't swing your score for most kids. So that's one of the things. All right. And again, because it's not really a science test like chem or bio. And most other admissions tests out there, the GRE, no science, the GMAT, no science, SAT, no science. You don't need science for a general admissions exam. And that was a singular thing. Like Everett Lindquist wanted to make a test that more closely adhered to the high school curriculum in the 50s and in the States. So he wanted science, but it's never really been a hard science test. And so falling in line with every other admissions test, whether it's the SSAT or the SAT or the PSA, there's no science, which I think is not really a big deal. All right, comparison. Now we're moving on. Matt, take it away from here.
Yeah. Okay. So we're looking at like SAT versus ACT, and in this one I can kind of speak. The ACT isn't really changing its content areas, right? So, these are still changing. So most of them they are similar. They test reading comprehension. They test your ability to spot errors in grammar. They both test science graphs because the SAT uses them in the reading section and in the math. And then it is in they tested most of the same math. Most primarily algebra, geometry, statistics. The ACT does have more math that goes into pre-calculus, and the SAT definitely has like more reading and the more range of reading, and can have to test poems and Shakespeare and things like that. Some quantity.
All right. Just to note, it's actually 8:45, which is amazing. We've been going deeper than we normally do.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure everyone we have time for questions. So I think we're going to do an expedited review. So we have time for Q&A. Let's do you mind if I do a blitzkrieg?
We can talk in tandem, we'll be faster.
All right. So the scales not changing. Scales are the same. 1600 top score, 36. That's the same. Reading level more advanced on the SAT. The math and science are more advanced on the ACT. Short and dirty. There still is more algebra. On the SAT, there still is more geometry and trig on the ACT. It's kind of a one small distinction. And you know what? I think we can skip I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit here to make sure we kind of spent longer going back and forth. There are more advanced math concepts that show up on the ACT that will never show up on the SAT. Conic sections, advanced matrices, more advanced trigonometry, asymptotes, and things like that. All right, I'm going to jump through. One thing, the Desmos calculator. Matt, talk briefly about Desmos.
Yeah, so Desmos is an online graphing calculator. It's free. It's desmos.com. Yeah, it is very well made. It is very fast. And so you have the ability to use Desmos on every SAT math question. The ACT, this new core test does not have Desmos integrated, though they are talking about adding it. But I think, who knows? That's probably more of their lawyers and trying to figure out things on there. But it lets you solve things graphically, and it is for the SAT is good. So we have a question here, but basically, how do you solve a system of equations? Boom, we put in Desmos. There you go. See,
Bam,
yeah,
just like
and
that.
the answer is where they touch, right? So you can use it to circumvent algebra codes.
Yeah. All right. Reading. It's currently all the structural things, but I'm going to kind of jump through some of this. Okay. And here's the structure, Matt. Just do a quick 1 minute hit on this.
Yeah. So this is for SAT reading and writing sections. Each module is always the same. So it starts off with craft and structure. So words and context is vocab. You have to, text structure is just answering things in like what is the purpose of stuff. And then it goes into some more classic reading, main idea stuff, the ability to find evidence for things, including using some graphs. And then it just transitions into grammar. And so boundaries and form structure sense are just like, do you understand basic grammar? And the expression of ideas finishes up. It's transitions, so it's like using however, furthermore, and then these weird rhetorical synthesis questions, which they give you a bullet to the list and you have to summarize them. It's the fastest I've ever done this slide.
Perfect. All right. The Blue Book app is for the SAT. Everyone who's taken the PSAT, taken ST, it's on the Blue Book app. It's the same one you practice on is the same one you take the tests on. You can kind of track your progress on the digital SAT. And we talked about that there are different modules. You can go to easy or hard. I'll just show you a quick picture. Baseline module has a mix of easy and hard. The easy module skews easy, and then the hard module skews hard. So they feel different. And we learned that on, we've learned that tests 1, 2, and 3 on the Blue Book app are a little bit too easy. That was an issue March of last year. When some kids were like, my score is lower than I thought because you were calibrating off test 1, 2, and 3. Blue Book test 4 through 6 are more accurately calibrated with what we're seeing on the current official SATs. And it looks more like
they're gonna the College Board has announced they're gonna retire for 1, 2, and 3, and redesign them and have them become 7, 8, 9.
that is wicked good. Amazing. Thank you, Matt. See the depth of information. Love that. Also, one distinction doesn't really make a difference for test takers. Different items have different weights on the SAT. They count different levels. And it's very opaque. They don't give you, you missed 1, you missed 2, you missed 3. They give you back these scoring grids, these heat maps. And so you can't tell that I missed question 23 or 25. You never know. How much did I miss a more heavy weighted question, a lighter weighted? They don't tell you any of that. They give you roughly a heat map of geometry, heat map of craft and structure, and that's it. So in Applerouth, our practice tests are much more granular, better information, more detailed, but this is all you get. That's one of the trade-offs. You have a short test, but it's less information shared with the students. How do you prep? Blue Book, practice, and so forth. And you want to take, the big question is, do I go for the SAT or go for the ACT? That really is the big question. And you want to take practice tests. It could be the PSAT, it could be you take a practice ACT. And now we have this one wrinkle of, do I take the short ACT or the longer one? Their research showed that students who do well on the long ACT in a similar fashion do well on the short ACT. And that's one of the reasons they're not having to do any concordance. They're saying it's almost identical. They've done a strong concordance. So, if that's true, then, I think there will obviously be some students will do a little better on one or the other for speed issues or whatnot. But if you do well on one, you'll probably do well on the other one. Okay. I'm going to jump. Okay. Ideally, plan on taking a test 3 times. So either 3 SATs or 3 ACTs. Some kids are one and done, some are two and done, but we see gains to the third test on average for students. And also most colleges now super score. They'll take your best verbal, your best math from, your math from March, your verbal from June. And that's why taking it more than once is to your advantage typically. Things that work, practice tests, starting early, having a goal, and spreading out your practice over time. There are 7 ACTs and 7 SATs over the course of a year, and you want to again build a testing plan with 3, and not 3 of each. Like choose your test, choose your lane. Am I going SAT or ACT? Once you choose your lane, and you lock in. I'm maybe taking the December, the March, the May SAT, or I'm taking potentially the February, April, and June. And we have the core. It's going to be digital just for 3 administrations. We'll have core digital for April, June, and July, and then boom, September, everyone's doing the core. And we believe that paper is better than the computer. There's no real reason, like on the SAT, that you have Desmos, other things, but there's no really advantage we see of taking the digital ACT in September. I think paper is great, personally. And so this is the weird year in January. We talked about that transition year, and so forth. All right, and there's different kinds of practicing different ways of planning out your prep. Ideally, if you're looking at taking like the June ACT, start prepping within a couple months of that. And you could do a class. That I like having like about 8-10 weeks before the first official test. That's my prep time, and to get me ready and to make sure I really learn the basics and foundations. That's super scoring, and so forth. Real short and sweet. I mentioned last year in February, it was like popcorn. Dartmouth required testing. Yale, Brown, UT Austin, Harvard, Caltech, Cornell, Stanford, Hopkins, in August. There's more coming, and it could be Princeton, it could be Penn, it could be Carnegie Mellon, other engineering schools. It could be University of Virginia, it could be UNC Chapel Hill. There are more schools coming online. So part of it, you may have your list, but that list it may change. So testing is a pretty smart thing, just given that the fact that it's a fluid state of things, so dynamic. The schools who might pop, look at Princeton. 85% of their kids who are enrolled at Princeton submitted test scores. They like testing. UNC, 81%. UVA, 70. Chicago, 76. Penn, 70%. So again, these schools seem to like testing because the vast majority of the kids who get in and who enroll have test scores. So I wouldn't be surprised. And here, there were some differential rates of admission. We learned that Yale admitted kids 3-1 before they began requiring testing with test scores. Boston College, almost 3-1. Georgia Tech was 2-1, Colgate 2-1, Notre Dame 2-1, Emory 2-1. So again, it seems like kids with test scores seem to be doing better in the admissions race. So you send your scores in. If your testing strengthens and aligns with your good grades and academic rigor, send your scores. They're only going to help you. And go if your scores are weak relative to your grades and academic rigor, then don't pollute a good thing with a weak test score. Make sure it contributes. So here's an example. You're applying to Colorado. They're middle 50. Half of their kids who are enrolled get between an 1170 and a 1380. So if I get a 1400, send it, send it, send it. If I get even a 1290, send it. If I get, though, in the bottom, if I get 1150, withhold it. There's some gray area in that third quartile. If I have like an 1170 versus 1260, if you are an engineer and you have a rocking good math score in there, send it, even though the verbal is a little bit lower, because as an engineer, you want to showcase your math chops. Or if your grades aren't that strong, but you have like a 1250, I'd probably send it. But if I have an amazing grades and amazing rigor and an 1180, I probably withhold it. And that's the whole dance between grades, rigor, and testing. It's like it's not an easy thing of always. It depends upon your grades and depends upon the relative strength of your test scores vis-a-vis your whole portfolio. All right, so now we're gonna give a tiny little survey. I think, Peter, that's if you need any support, we're here for the support, and we've been helping kids for many, many years. And now it's time for questions and answers.
Yeah,
So we already have, I think, 6 Q&A. Let's open this up. Matt, first question is yours.
yeah. All right. So someone asked if my son already taken the ACT and got a composite score of 34.25, which is a great score. Although it would just be round down to a 34. And he wants to take if he wants to take the digital, how does it going to affect since science is going to will be removed? Do you just one more time? He's a sophomore. Okay. So first, I mean, great score for a sophomore. First on there. Now, when the time he gets into college admissions, that science score will have been permanently placed in its own category and will not affect the composite. Which we're looking at um the other one, it's if I'm doing the math, I think
This would help. This would go with 35.
you have a 35. So actually, yeah, it would be beneficial. And I think the only issue is sometimes schools want testing from junior year, and that's just like your college counselor will be able to tell you that better if it makes sense. But I would not worry about this. Is these are really strong scores. The I would we focus on keeping grades and taking good academic rigor and APs or IB, whatever the school offers. It's not that's not a worrisome situation to me. Anything to add?
Perfect. If you took the old ACT paper format, will the ACT still drop down to 3 components minus science when calculating the composite score? Yeah, that's right. So everything gets reconfigured in September. So all old tests, they strip out science. It'll be there, just on the side. And the composite is the first three. All right, cool. We help kids prep for the SAT and or the ACT? We help prep kids for both. So
Yeah.
if you need help yeah.
That question was about the test centers. Remember we were showing the amount, the miles stuff to drive. That's when that popped
Oh,
up.
that was for the ACT.
Yeah, that was only the SAT is not having the problems that the digital ACT is having at
No.
the
Yeah,
moment.
the digital SAT is all there is. There is no paper SAT. That died. So
Right.
whenever you're scanning for how far is the test center, every test that's administered in the world for the SAT is a digital test. They talked about giving some accommodations for paper, but that thing got erased. All right, my sophomore took the paper ACT in December and scored 35. Crushed it.
I know.
Plans to use that. Do you see any issues? No, I don't see any issues. You got 35, you're a sophomore. I ride that to the bank.
Yeah. It would only be like if for some reason the counselor says you should have a more recent test, but I think that's
I mean, typically they're going to accept, yeah, but that would
yeah.
be an unusual case. Yeah, that's well done for your son. He can go and play. Get him a PlayStation 5 and things will be good.
Make sure his GPA drops.
Exactly. Watch the GPA dropping. All right. Does the ACT Science allow a calculator? No calculator, but you don't need one.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. I mean, there is some math, and I know we mentioned that, but the math is like subtraction or
It's
doubling.
it's
Like
not advanced
it's
mathematics on
and it's
science.
nothing. You don't have to know physics formulas or anything that is like um anything real about it. And you can't even get it as an accommodation. So I would not worry about that.
There's a question on the digital SAT, wrong answers. How does each wrong answer affect your score? How many points do you lose? So again, there's a tremendous deal of ambiguity. And there's something called item response theory, where there are variable weights. I miss question 13, that dings me 1.5 raw points. I miss question 19, I lose 2.3 raw points. So there are up to like 4 different weights on how important the question is, how much it correlates with the key concepts, how much it loads onto a certain factor they're trying to assess. So because of that, there is no static one raw point, one scale point. That's gone. Now, every question they ask, now actually it's dynamic and it's tied to how the population does. There's incredible variability there. We think
Yeah,
though the ACT should be more of a linear scale point. A raw point converts to a certain scale point, and every question is the same. We don't expect them to have any kind of variable weighting in questions.
yeah. Though one of the questions was asking, could you get like if you picked a word, like there's like the right answer, then there's like a pretty good answer, and then there's just like a trash answer. The answer like would you lose more? Like would it be hurtful to pick like really a bad answer? And we have no evidence of that on any of the practice tests of that being true. And we've gone through and run different like taken the test different ways to see kind of the what it feeds back, and so we don't see any evidence of that though. I mean, I can't say 100% that it doesn't happen.
If you've already taken ACT, can I withhold my science score? I would be surprised if they let you purge an old science score. I think they'll just be there detached from the composite. So that's my instinct. I'd be very surprised
Yeah.
if they let you erase one. All right, I have a sophomore who's taken pre-cal. Can I start prep for the SAT, ACT? The answer is you could start prepping. If you're in pre-cal, you're beyond the relevant math. Typically, we say wait to the end of sophomore year. That's our general guidance, but we do some work with sophomores who are very advanced, both in their verbal skills and their math skills. Because they're
We
already
do
on
have
to, yeah. Matt, do you have any thoughts?
oh yeah, we do have a foundations course, which is kind of it's like half academic tutoring and half SCD ACT that's meant for early starters that want to get things going. So you can talk to talk to a program director. They can explain what that looks like.
Perfect. Do we do prep for just one section? You betcha, all the time. If you need just 3 hours of verbal, we gotcha. 6 hours of math, whatever you need.
Yeah, for private tutoring for sure. Like
For
not that's
private
not
tutoring,
groups.
right. If you're doing a group, there's a group structure.
Group's going to cover everything because it's meant to be for all students.
Yeah. Um, the paper HT has a writing section. That's the essay. What's the difference? That essay, about a quarter million kids take the essay. There are some states where they use the essay as a proxy for like the writing skills for like the state. And so every student must take an ACT for part of the graduating exam, and they must take the writing assessment. And that's a way to measure how are different schools doing in our state. So it's not really for college admissions. After the SAT dropped their essay, colleges said, well, forget it. It's only a minority of people. And there's some utility for people internationally to showcase their writing skills. But honestly, not everyone's doing it, and people taking the ST aren't doing it. They might use the TOEFL or other things, getting a sense of their writing skills. So honestly, it really is mostly for states trying to assess how well their high schools are doing teaching kids how to write. How do I know based on the GPA and test scores to apply for early admission? Well, you want to look at the profile. Are you on profile or below profile? If they want, a 3.8 GPA, it's their average including freshman class, and they have an average test score of, let's say it's 1350. If my test scores, if I have, roughly in that middle 50 bracket, I would send test scores. If not, and then early, you want to, there's early decision and early action. Early action, early decision, you have like one shot. And you want to save that for one where you're pretty close to profile. If I'm really, really below if a school wants a 35 ACT and I have a 31, you're probably not going to get it with early. Unless there's something really special about you, you have some connection, you're an athlete, some hook. Otherwise, though, but if they want a 35 and have a 34 or a 33, I think applying early decision could be beneficial. But early action, it's not really, you're not using your bullet. It's kind of I tell you early, you tell me early. But that's not the same calculus as for early decision, which is really limiting. You're limited to one. Okay. When it comes to the math portion, what's the alignment to high school math course? So what percent of the test is geometry? Matt, we gave a slide on that, but that's
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of paraphrase that. So for the SAT, the math tops out at Algebra 2, and Algebra 1, Algebra 2 constitutes about 60% of the test. The rest of it is geometry and a little bit of statistics, but not what I would call AP stats, just like data representation. For ACT, it tops out at pre-calculus, though it is more geometry in Algebra 2, but some pre-calculus on there, and it's kind of you know not dominant, but they're that's where they create the hard math on there. I think that's a cursory answer without looking at the percentages in front of me.
There was a question from September going forward. Science goes out as a standalone. Is a 35 from the base good? Yeah, 35 is a good score. That's top 1-2% in the country. Can or should a rising sophomore take the ACT during the summer vacations? He's currently doing AP pre-cal, so my guess is he'd have to learn the concepts. We have a lot of kids do summer prep, especially our high flyers. Some of them are taking 4 APs or 4 IB classes, and so they want to get it done in the summer. And you have all these options now. You have a June test, you have a July test, you have an August SAT, and then September ACT. So yeah, summertime is actually a very popular time for kids to do prep and knock out their exams. Happens all the time. The ACT one section retakes on the back burner for a while, actually permanently killed. They put a knife at the heart of
The
the one
Bacchus
section
burner.
retake because colleges were not on board. They announced it thinking it was super student friendly, and colleges says, I don't buy it, I don't like it, I don't care about your data. And so they killed it and unceremoniously deleted that page from the website. And there wasn't any big mea culpa. It was just, whoops, data shows no go, no whammies, no
Well,
whammies, whammy. So that one's now gone forever, never to be
yeah,
seen.
they announced it right before the pandemic, and I think also they,
Yeah, but then
yeah,
they didn't get buy-in, and without
right,
buy-in, don't tick off your constituent, your main customers.
yeah.
About how many points does a student grow over the course of testing 3 times? The natural growth, oh, well, again, there's with preparation, then there's without preparation. If you do just taking it without that kind of feedback, you're going to go up like, I don't know, maybe a point of growth. But with deliberate feedback, where you're getting corrections, I'm studying what did I get right, what did I get wrong, why did I miss question 25, why did I choose C? We're seeing kids pick up, on average at Applerouth, we're getting over 4 points. So we're, for the ACT, and it's over 100 points on the SAT. But that's deliberate feedback and you're focusing on what you missed. But yeah, there is a very small, just natural growth, just retaking it. But it's that learning from your errors is where you get the real points. When did you say the paper is phasing out? Paper, it's not phasing out. The paper ACT is going to be here until the demand is gone. That could be 3 years, that could be 6 years. And I think they're going to start to give incentives to move people from paper to digital. Because again, paper, maybe if there's one more scandal and they have this one more like leak, then they may just say, okay, we're done. That happened internationally. Well, in 2019, AST forced everyone to digital because there have been these scandals were in Hong Kong, scandal in South Korea, in China, in Egypt, and India, like all these countries, they were canceling the entire country. It was so stupid. Like, all right, no more paper. Paper's gone. So I think if there's any more like that, that could be a fast precursor. That could be a driver. Otherwise, what Janet Godwin said is when demand dries up, paper dies. But digital, will be an option starting in April. Will all the SAT test scores taken be tracked by colleges? Matt, take that one.
Yeah, so like you have to submit scores to colleges, and you tell the SEC where to send it. So, the SEC, like the College Board, is not sending all of your information to colleges. So you choose which scores you want to send. So they are being tracked, in the sense of like it's not like, oh, like you went on a school visit and they're looking at your SAT scores like, well, we're not going to be nice to this kid at the tour because they're not our caliber or something. It's a closed door until you open it. And the College Board's not leaking your scores to, so you have to consent to send them to specific schools.
There is a question, if I opt in for science, and let's say I don't like my science score, can I withhold it? That is something we don't know about, and I'm inclined to think you can't. Until they tell me otherwise, my default instinct is you take it, it's going to be included in your profile.
Well, you can't
Um,
cancel the essay, and they can the writing the ACD writing that you can't say, oh, I
right,
don't like it.
right.
My
The
hand cramped up,
essay, right.
so I
It's
couldn't
not
work.
it's not like you can withhold an AP score you don't like. This is part of the test.
Hmm.
Even though it's an optional add-on, I think it's still part of the test. So my impulse is you take it. So make sure your kid's good at science before they sign for science. Um, okay. That is it. We have
We did
answered
it.
all the questions.
It's good
So,
questions.
so if you, we're going to have more of these discussions. We'll do this again with more information as it comes available. And if any of you need help with the SAT or the ACT, that's what we do very well for over almost 20 years. And that's it. All right, y'all. Well, I'll say goodnight to everybody. Thank you so much for being here and look forward to the next time we meet. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.